Back out by Jamie Baker. Yushkevich wheels it back in. Lindros lost. Archibald takes him out of the play. Up with it is Recchi. Walks in front. Shot one, knocked down. Rebound, score! Lindros!
Hey everybody, it's Isaiah. Just reminding you that FlyersNittyGritty.com and the O&B Puckcast are brought to you by Summit Public Adjusters. Hey, do you have damage to your home? Not sure who to call? We suggest that you call Summit Public Adjusters before your insurance company. Dealing with your insurance company can be very stressful. Let Summit take the stress out of the claims process. From storm damage to your roof, to toilet overflows, to broken pipes and fires, Summit gets you the most money for your repairs. So next time Mother Nature leaves you in need of repairs, call Summit Public Adjusters at 215-752-0560 or visit summitpublicadjusters.com. Licensed in PA and New Jersey.
And we are back. It is Isaiah. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast, episode number 215. As the Flyers are driving for the playoffs after the trade deadline. We were with you not too long ago, and the Flyers made a few more moves. We'll go through that. We're brought to you by Flyers Nitty Gritty. And before we bring our panel in, just wanted to sum up here. The Flyers are 1-1 since our last episode. Only 2 games of a split in Florida, which most of us would have taken. Maybe not the way it came down, but we'll get to that. They're 33-24 and 8 for 74 points overall, barely clinging to a playoff spot with 17 games remaining. According to Money Puck, they have a 77.5% chance of making the playoffs. So, I mean, that's a little bit higher than a lot of us are thinking, with the Islanders winning 6 or 7 in a row. The crosstabs on this are as follows. So according to Money Puck, they have a 1% chance of finishing in second place, 54.9% chance of finishing where they're at right now in third place in the Metro, a 6.4% chance of grabbing the first wild card spot, and a 15.2% chance of getting that second wild card spot. I don't know how they figure this. And also, I should mention, for some of the fan base out there, they have a 0.1% chance of getting the first overall pick. So
still early though.
Yeah, it's still early. And let's bring in our panel here. Always to my left, Chef B. How are you? What's on your mind? Good.
Fun little trade deadline to cap a fun year as we were kind of pre-gaming it, and as the quote, not to waste the show before the show, what we were talking about was, hey, you could say anything you want about this team, but the one thing you can't call them is boring. And there's, they've been exciting all year. They've been fun all year. Yeah, they get a couple ups and downs, but guess what, man? This loss that we're going to talk about to Tampa. That was the norm 5 or 6 times the last couple of years. That wasn't, this was unexpected for this team that's been playing this year. So it's going to be good to delve into a couple of little extra things that we noticed and the trades, of course. So can't wait to get started, man.
Well, we've already done the whole show. Let's go. No, yeah, you summed it up real well. It's the old saying when you're doing a speech, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you tell them. Anyway, tonight, the great Dan Silver is on work assignment. He will not be able to join us, but from NBC Sports Philadelphia.com, the great Jordan Hall is with us. Glad to have you with us, Jordan. Welcome to the O&B Puckcast once again.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, guys. Always great to see you guys and chat.
Yes. Now, you're one of the hardest, if not the hardest working guy on the beat. So we got a lot of opinions about what the Flyers did at the trade deadline. We covered the big stuff that happened last Wednesday, but we'd like to get your take on that, as well as the moves involving Eric Johnson facilitating the trade that ended up sending Tomas Hertl to the Vegas Golden Knights, stepping in there, grabbing a pick by eating some cap space. The swap that helped the Flyers get Dennis Gurianov with via Wade Allison and the rest of it.
Yeah, it's funny. Danny Briere really did his work 2 days before the deadline. I thought he crossed two big boxes off, and that was moving Sean Walker and, of course, signing Nick Seeler to an extension. Those were probably the two biggest trade chips I felt the Flyers had, just given the expiring contracts, teams always wanting to add depth on defense. Scott Laughton, I never really felt in my gut that they were going to move him. I thought deep down they were going to want to keep this guy. He still has 2 more years left on his contract. So if they want to revisit a trade down the road, they can. But with Friday's work, I thought Danny Briere made out really well. I know some people were maybe upset that he gave up a 4th-round pick for Eric Johnson, but I almost thought it would have been malpractice if he did not try to add a defenseman. I mean, they are so thin on defense. It's almost hard to wrap your head around it. They have defensemen dropping like flies. I mean, just the other night, and whether it was their fault or not, they had to play 5 defensemen because they didn't have enough. So I thought adding Eric Johnson was a nice move. You get a veteran guy in here on an expiring deal, and you give up a 4th-round pick. And why I thought it wasn't terrible to give up the 4th was that they added a 5th-round pick by being a third party in that Golden Knights Flames trade. So now they have 2 5th-round picks in that 2024 draft, and they have 2 first-rounders in that 2024 draft. So I thought that alleviated the pain a little bit of giving up a 4th for a veteran guy that's only going to be here down the stretch. And then the Allison for Gurianov trade, I thought was fine. Gurianov's got a lot of intrigue, a lot of upside. I thought Wade Allison was very much a change of scenery candidate. He's on an expiring contract, so I think they very much thought it was time to kind of part ways there and get a bigger forward that's got some experience, got some playoff experience, and add him to the roster right now. So overall, long story short, I thought Briere did a fine job. I really had no qualms with anything that he did. And the key, I thought, was that he did not lose sight of the future. The fact that they got a 1st-round pick for Sean Walker, I thought was very, very important, and I thought he stuck to his word.
Yeah, but Chef, before you go on, I mean, one of the lingering issues, the way that Flyers got that 1st-round pick in large part was taking on Ryan Johansson from the Avalanche, and that's a developing situation. I wanted to get your comment on in terms of what is his future and what is the agent and his proximity to Cutter Gauthier, and whether that's anything or is it just the player himself? And then Chef, you can hop in there.
I think it's a little bit of everything. And I believe, was it on 32 Thoughts podcast with Elliot Freeman that they mentioned the link to Cutter Gauthier's agent? See, I did not know that personally, but listen, it would not surprise me if him having the same agent as Cutter Gauthier is probably souring the relationship a little bit. But I really think they probably took on that contract because they needed to facilitate the deal. And they probably just very much realize they don't think he has a future here. And they assigned him to Lehigh Valley. I don't, from what I gather, he doesn't want to report there. And I don't know where it's all going to go. But I think the overall theme of this is that I don't expect Ryan Johansson to be a Flyer or be on their roster at all. And I think eventually they will try to move him, whether it be in the summer or whether it be a buyout. But I don't see any future for Ryan Johansson. And I think it was very much what they had to do in order to get a 1st-round pick. And I thought that was smart. I think it's good that they're being creative in the way they're trying to get these trades done.
Yeah, absolutely, Chef.
I want to go back to what you said about Laughton. I listened to your show, Flyers Talk, with you have Brooke Destra on, and you guys were talking about how it was good that that Laughton was out there and that they were going to listen, and it had to be something that was going to blow their minds. We all agreed on that. That was a good thing. there's one thing I'm curious about, because I know you guys disputed the fact that would his trade value still go up in the offseason? Maybe, before the draft or at the end of next season, this time next year when he's only got 1 year left, will it make him valuable? I mean, when Danny said at the press conference, he's like, he had a special relationship with him because they had played together, and he wanted to be straight with him as he can. He goes, you're not worth market value. You're not worth a fair trade. You're worth a lot more than that, because that's how much he brings to this team. And I know I think it was either you or Brooke, I can't remember which one said it, that was like, oh, well, next year, if it's fair market value next year, because this team probably will turn over a couple roster spots, it might look a little different next year. It might not have the same impact. Do you think he'll keep it and retain his value next year, or is there going to be a little bit of a drop off?
That's an excellent question, because I think that's the biggest question is, can his value get any higher? And I'm not sure it can. I think the world of Scott Laughton. I think he's a very, very good player, very valuable, and I can see why contending teams love him. But will he get any better? Like, is this his peak? And I think that, and I wrote that in an article leading up to the deadline, was the biggest counterpoint to people saying, keep Laughton, he's heart and soul, he's important to this rebuild. You can maybe revisit a trade down the line. The counterpoint is his value ever going to get any higher? And do you have to cash in when the guy's, certain guy's value is at its peak? And I mean, a good general manager probably does that. You try to cash in on assets when they're at their best value. I'm not saying Danny Briere is not a good general manager and he didn't do that, but that will be the big question: is will his value, can it get higher? Can he maintain his value? And will the Flyers be in a place where they're going to be looking to move him? Perhaps they have a drop-off next season. Perhaps the rebuild takes a step backward, and then they have more reason to move him. I don't have the answer. I really don't. But I think that was their biggest decision, and their toughest, without a doubt. Because Briere, I think, has an emotional attachment to him. He played with him. He was a teammate of Scott Laughton. So, he's going to face tough decisions, and that was a tough one. And I think it's going to be a tough one down the road, too. Is kind of parting ways with a heart and soul Flyer, a guy that he played with, and a guy that means a lot to the organization, and he's held the organization in high regard as well. I mean, you can't disagree with how much he cares about the organization, but I think it'll be a massive question come summer and come next trade deadline as well.
Yeah, I think just real fast, I think a lot of it will have to do with how successful the Flyers are in procuring the services of another center. They're loaded on wing, and while I think Laughton, it's pretty much a consensus, is a little bit more effective on the wing. They need him right now at center because of that versatility. And even though Paling took some of that away, and he's a very similar player, different style, but in terms of versatility, I think a lot of that will depend on that, Chef.
Yeah, I think if you look at the decision he made, and I think he made the right decision this year at this time and moment, because yes, he's more valuable, and unless you get something that blows you away, you don't do that, because this team, they could, keep saying money puck. They defied the odds all this year anyway. So they come out here, and I think you had shared, was it a tweet, I think, about the top 10 teams, or their record against 10 teams?
They have 10 wins over top teams.
Exactly. So these are the guys that are going to face in the playoffs, and people say, "Oh, they won't last a series here." Well, they've done it. They've done it all season. Then you hope that tomorrow that they don't crash and burn to San Jose, but a very gutted San Jose. This should be, they need to do to San Jose what the Lightning did to them. But I think next year, if you have to trade them, I think it's a good thing. But I think this was the best decision, because you want to reward the guys for how they played all year. I mean, for the most part, they played ahead, a lot of games, and they've never gone away. They never quit. So this is the little bit of reward, which I think is fair. And I think also I think Jason Martinez said, you're 2 years ahead now in your rebuild because of the players dictating what the rebuild is going to be. And I think that was a good decision by him.
Yeah.
I think you run a real serious risk if and I agree with you. You run a real serious risk if you gut your roster when the team's done this. I understand still looking at the future, and they need to, but Denny Blair from day one said players will dictate the rebuild, and so far they have. They have put themselves past the final quarter mark in a very good position. And if they were to sell off 3 or 4 key pieces and not reward them at all, you start to lose buy-in. You start to lose guys wanting to be here. Like eventually you have to tell players, yes, if you play well and we win games, we will reward you. Because if you continue to almost think in like a tank perspective, we're going to continue to tank and sell off pieces and never commit, then you're not going to want guys. You're not going to have guys wanting to play here. And John Tortorella is all about buy-in. And I don't know how you get buy-in if you don't reward your players just a little bit. And I thought keeping the team somewhat intact was the reward.
Speaking of tanking, isn't Chicago officially mathematically out? Blackhawks? Is that today?
Yes.
That's
over the weekend.
That's a very good point. They have the best prospect in a very long time, and they're not going to see any extra action. There's nothing around him. It's a shame. So I'm glad that there's going to be different. We've seen the different perspectives about how to rebuild a team. You see, Ottawa, Buffalo, Chicago now. So I think that they're going to set up. You see what Vegas did, for God's sakes. But I think this is going to be a standard, a different kind of standard, a way to rebuild without crushing your team, because this is more along the lines of kind of like the Rangers did. The Rangers just dipped for one season, and that was it. And then they seem to be backing into the mix. And I'm glad that they took this perspective instead of tanking the whole thing, because you can't build winning in tanking, a winning atmosphere.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's part of what the Flyers did not want to do, like you guys are saying. I'm more or less echoing with it from a different perspective. If you throw the cultural growth and buy-in into the dumpster just for assets, then you're leaning more towards, Arizona and Buffalo and going in that direction. And if you're going to do that, Don't, go halfway. So they've committed to growing the culture so they don't become teams like that. And it requires a sacrifice. The doubt creeps in among the tanking crew is that you don't get the hockey equivalent of an Embiid. Not that the Sixers have won anything, but you don't get those players like a McDavid or a Bedard, or in this case, coming up, Macklin Celebrini. But there are other ways to do this, and apparently that's the tack that the Flyers are going to run with, and we'll see how it works. Referencing what Chef said earlier, Jordan, so the Flyers have beaten the Panthers twice, the Canucks twice, the Stars, the Jets twice, the Avalanche. Really impressive game in Colorado earlier this year. They beat the Hurricanes and the Oilers. So, I mean, that's an impressive list. Of course, post-trade deadline, if you break apart your best defensive pair, which is really Sealer and Walker. If we weren't sure before, a couple games later, we're seeing it now. I mean, Sean Walker was playing at an all-star level, I think. And even the serious number crunchers seem to agree with that. So with this, trade that they made, and on top of that, Steelers out, Risto and Drysdale was out. Drysdale would seem to be the replacement, more or less, for Walker going forward with Sealer. Maybe that's a good pairing. Like, how do you see the Flyers overcoming that? And as Tortorella was talking about, playing the same way.
Yeah, I think it's really concerning what's going on with their defense, and maybe part of it's bad luck. I mean, injuries happen, and we've seen it with the Flyers in years past. Maybe they got pretty fortunate with injuries in this part of the season, and now it's starting to catch up to them. But, man, they are really, really thin at the most important position. And I thought really what was driving their success this season was their back end exceeding expectations. I mean, everyone across the board I thought was exceeding expectations. Sean Walker came out of nowhere. Nick Sealer became a top 4 guy. Travis Sanheim looked more and more like a top pair guy. Cam York was playing some of the biggest minutes on the team. They had guys that were answering the bell and then some on the back end. And, the contending teams, that's what they do, is they build from the back out. The Flyers want to do that. And now all of a sudden they look really thin. And their second pair, which was probably their best pair, as you mentioned, is no longer here, or at least half of it is no longer here. And Sealer's not playing right now. So I think they're going to desperately really need Nick Sealer back soon. And he's the one I think is closest to returning, if anyone. Drysdale and Ristolainen, I think they're dealing with a little more serious issues. Sealer, I think it's just going to take a little bit of time, but I think they believe he can be back sooner rather than later. I think if he gets back, all of a sudden, I think you stabilize a little bit on the back end there. I think he's that important to them. Everything I think you kind of get the chairs all properly aligned when he comes back. But without him, I mean, I really think they need to stay afloat. And I really do think it will impact the way they play. I think it's going to put a lot on Cam York's plate to kind of orchestrate things from the back end. Travis Sanheim, he's up and down when he's aggressive. He needs to do that all the time. He needs to really make things happen from the back end. So I think it'll be York and Sanheim guys that they are really going to have to rely on and get even more from the players up front.
Yeah, absolutely, Chef.
So I know, let's fixate on the defense. One quick thing before I ask my question is, I really think that this Walker trade is going to really be held as one of the best trades in a long time for this franchise, simply for the fact that you're going to find out that it was a system player, and that's how good he was in this system, because he followed the system. I think you're going to see that maybe some of these other guys, like Stahl probably played one of his better games the other night, but I know he's slow and he's a little older and all that, but because of his positioning in that game, he ended up playing better that way. But I will say that, and I think that Walker's going to be a little bit more exposed, because I don't think other defenses have been as regimented as I guess the Flyers have been. I'm just going to throw that out there. I don't know. I don't know that. It seems to be a little observation for me. But I thought that the other night when the filling guys came up, the Phantoms, I think they did a pretty good job. I couldn't complain. I mean, Yinning had a couple of nice hits. So did Attard. I just thought, man, this is kind of like, all right, we got some bigger guys back there now. I know we were used to the smaller guys, and I guess had they known that Zamula was going to be sick, they probably would have kept Yinning up. Is it Yinning or Ginning now?
He says he preferred, or he's okay with Ginning, but
okay.
Really in his home country it's Yinning with a
go. Oh, so I was right. Okay, all right, Yinning. So I'll just go by Yinning then. So I can never remember which one it is. But
if I could interject in here, I will say one thing: it is addered like scattered.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
addered. Okay, all right. So that's fine. But I thought they did admirable. I think they filled in. I think they rose to the occasion, next man up kind of mentality. And I thought they kind of deserved another look, whether or not, and it's a shame, I know, because we got new guys in and there was some shuffling around and all that after it. But I just thought, okay, well, we're at that time of year though now where, we're at the end of the flu season, hopefully. And these guys keep getting whacked. I would just think about carrying an extra D with the club all the time now to prevent all this, though. So what did you think of their performance, Jordan?
No, I couldn't agree more. I thought Adder and Yinning really handled themselves well. I mean, to hold a Panthers team like that to one goal, I thought was very impressive. And they're going to need more of that. And I think that will be the theme here, is they're going to play a lot of low-scoring, hard-fought games. And that's this time of the year, very much, but also you sacrifice offense when you don't have Sean Walker, when you don't have Jamie Drysdale, two, puck movers that really benefit from this system of allowing defensemen to carry the puck, take risks, and kind of enter the offensive zone and make things happen. So I think they're going to become a little more defensive right now and really, really have to rely on some of their big names up front, like Konechny and Tippett and Farabee and Couturier and you name them to create offense, because I think they're just going to have to be more defensive with the personnel they have.
Yeah, I think in that Florida game, what you saw, and it's a game, of course, that the Flyers won 2-1. you saw them come out a little slow, and then slowly but surely they took away that neutral zone in the middle, which is what the Flyers are trying to do, so the teams can't just develop that speed and hit the D zone with all that attack and with all these zone entries. And the Flyers did a really good job. Their sticks are really good positions, and they're, blocking, passing, and shooting lanes. It was really tough. If I were the Panthers, I would have been totally frustrated by what the Flyers are doing. That's the Flyers, like you said earlier, really on top of their game. And then we get to the Tampa game, and with the aid, in my humble opinion, of some pretty nasty officiating, which obviously John Tortorella agreed with. We'll get into that. I mean, this game totally got away from them. And of course, Tampa was coming off a butt whipping out in Calgary. So that was a real part of the toxic brew that ended up in this humiliation for the Flyers. So Jordan, the game itself it's almost like you don't even want to talk about it. I mean, I think the defense, that's when you saw the lack of breakout capability in that game. And it was notable that we didn't have Adred and Jennings, but we had EJ in there, Eric Johnson, and he's not the fastest guy. And Zamula wasn't playing, so I had 5 defensemen, and they still weren't willing to play Bobby Brink, and you have Cam Atkinson, who's really hit a wall. And that's one part of it. And then, of course, you have the whole sideshow with Tortorella. So whatever you want to start first, because those are 2 different categories of topic, really, you think?
I thought it was a perfect storm. Some of the things that you mentioned, you get Tampa Bay, who's ticked off. It got challenged by its head coach. It's a team with a ton of pedigree, scoring. And then the Flyers, I think the wheels just fell off after that 4th goal for many reasons. One, I think they're a little stunned. It's 4-0, and it's only halfway through the first period, and then the coach gets tossed. And I just think everyone was just kind of flabbergasted. They just didn't know what to do. And for once, there was no real pushback. And to the Flyers' credit, they have often not quit on games, and they've pushed back. And I don't think they quit. I just don't think they had any chance to come back. And I very much agree that it's a game I think you just kind of put in the dumpster and move on from. You don't really think much of it or put much into it. They were playing 5 defensemen. They were facing a Lightning team that was pretty determined and motivated to make a statement. And the Flyers lose their head coach in the game. So I think it's a game they're going to try to really forget about. And I think people will forget about it if they beat this Sharks team and kind of have it carry over into this brutal stretch they have coming up. If you string together 2 or 3 positive performances, no one's going to remember that Lightning game. And I said the same thing when they lost to the Sharks early in the season. Everyone was kind of making fun of them, and justifiably so. But I said if they do something positive after that game and they build on it, no one's going to remember that loss. And I don't think a lot of people did, because they all of a sudden they kind of took off and became a playoff team, or what people think are a playoff team. So that'll be the challenge here.
Yeah, definitely. Chef?
Since Isaiah mentioned Atkinson, he's been, he's been the ire. I think other players should really get the look before him now. I think maybe even Torts is seeing that. But I will say this. He had the quote of the day, didn't he, when he said, next coach up mentality? I thought that was hysterical. I guess when you've known Torts as long as you can get away with saying stuff like that. We'll find out if he's playing next game because you can't coach from the bench, but nothing says about writing the lineup card. That's for sure. But right. But I will say this, that just goes to show you the attitude of this team. All right. Yeah, we got smoked. We got smoked, but they took it as like, all right, how can we build on this? And I guess the thing that we're even missing here is that he freaked out because 3 really bad calls that led to 2 of which directly led to goals. Yeah. And he stuck up for his guys. And whether or not it was just him going apeshit for no reason or just going crazy, what it is when he preached about accountability in the locker room to everybody. He put himself out there and did it, and to the point where, no, I'm not going anywhere. Okay, find me. I don't care. Do this stuff. So, and then for Dan Hilferty to say whatever it is, I'll pay it. Is a great thing. This, if you'd have heard this 2 years ago, would have been like, we got to fire him. We got to, all this stuff. Here, you got upper management now backing you. That was very Snyder-esque of him to do that, Dan Hilferty. And I think everybody in the organization is bought into what's going on right now. And that was the greater picture that showed me that everybody's in. And I just want to see if you could speak to any of that, but since you're down there a lot more than we are.
No, I love that point. I thought it would have been very corporate to almost be embarrassed of Torts or be like, I can't believe our coach did that. Instead, Dan Hilferty kind of shows he's a Philadelphian and says, no, that's our guy. Like he cursed off the refs. He didn't want to leave the bench. We love that attitude. We love that don't give in attitude. So I liked it. I think the Flyers probably wanted that to go public, and I don't blame them. They probably wanted it out there that Dan Hilferty was going to cover that fine and had the back of his head coach. And to me, I think Tortorella deserves it because why? That guy has defended everyone and then some through really bad days. I mean, he defended Chuck Fletcher like anything. And I always thought that was commendable that, Fletcher, and I'm not bashing Chuck Fletcher. I thought he was a fine person and GM, but he was under fire here a lot. And John Tortorella always had his back. I always thought that was pretty cool. And he's always defended his players. Some of his biggest media beefs, when he gets into it with us is because he's defending a player. So I've always admired that about John Tortorella. And here was an example where someone had to have his back and he did. And so stick taps to Dan Hilferty. I thought that was very cool. And I think he's done a great job at not trying to be Ed Snyder, but trying to take away some things that Ed Snyder did and kind of implement them into his style.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting with the whole scenario where the Flyers ball behind 4-0. The phantom call, maybe two bad calls on Adard. Yeah. And then the little bump with the shoulder by Hathaway that gets immediate 10-minute misconduct. And I don't blame him for being upset. I just have to wonder, though, what did Tortorella do or say that it number one, shouldn't have been preceded by a bench minor, and number two, the league responds that with a 2-game suspension and a $50,000 fine. It's even Elliot Friedman was questioning, because we don't know the whole story and officials aren't allowed to talk. People were left social media will go crazy, and they have pictures of Jacob Trouba taking a baseball swing at a guy, and he got less of a suspension than that.
Quick question: Wes McCauley was not the one that made that call.
It was the other rep, the junior
exactly.
guy.
The junior guy, and I think, Wes McCauley, I guess, is he's a pretty decent rep. He's pretty much a straight shooter. I don't think I've had many problems with him. To his benefit, it's a hard thing to do, to back somebody you think is wrong. And I think that's your guy. It's your the other official. You're riding and dying with him out there. I just because I think Wes McCauley's probably done a lot of playoffs and Stanley Cups and stuff like that. So I'm pretty sure that him and Torts weren't the issue. It was maybe the younger junior referee. And hey, look, I got to do this. I got to draw the line in the sand and that kind of thing. I think that's where it comes from. And I don't know, like you said, I can't imagine what was said in order to garner all that too. But I don't blame Wes McCauley for throwing him out there, because look, man, you want Dan Hilferty to pay the fine for his guy, so I can't get mad at McCauley for backing up his guy,
Yeah, I think on Wes McCauley's NHL referee bio page, it says he's been in 10 Stanley Cups. So yeah, he's a veteran ref who's been around. Yeah, so I'm sure him and Torts have a mutual respect. And I agree with you. Like maybe he felt like his guy was taking a lot of heat from Torts, and he was just trying to stand up for him and say, "Listen, enough's enough." And Cam Atkinson was on the bench, and we talked to him today, and he said, "Listen, I heard what Torts said, and I didn't think it warranted an ejection." So maybe this was just a veteran ref being a little more strict and saying enough is enough. But I can't imagine he said anything that he hasn't said in the past. Torts choose out refs all the time. But I will say this: I kind of understand the league's suspension. I mean, it's not a good look. Torts is refusing to leave the bench, and he's visibly cursing off these refs. Like, good for Torts. He stood up for himself, but I also think the league needs to come down hard here and say, listen, we're not going to allow this to happen all the time. We have this coach on TV mouthing off these refs and refusing to leave. So part of me is like, hey, listen, he's got a bit of a history, and 2 games is 2 games.
Well, I don't know. I saw him saying flower baskets. I said a flower basket. He was talking about a flower basket. Obviously, he was going to send them flowers later. So that's what it looked like to me. I don't know why you would get mad about that. So
Brandon Schrader is the name of the young official who may become the new Dave Newell. That's
West,
a name from the
Cowboy
past.
Joe West of the hockey world.
Well, Dave Newell was a target of the ire of Flyers fans, I think, in the 70s and 80s. Yes. So,
and I will say this: I thought the ejection, having it come on Alumni Weekend for the Lightning, where Torts was part of this celebration, I thought that would have been enough punishment, but apparently it wasn't. Because I think Torts was a little bit embarrassed. I really do. I think he was just stunned he got ejected. Like I don't think he could believe it, and it comes on a weekend where he's got so many people that he worked with and took a Stanley Cup to Tampa Bay. So I thought that maybe would have been enough. Apparently it wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, now he knows how Sandheim feels. So.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
Maybe. Little shot there. I got it. Yeah. Okay, so the Flyers go 1-1, and the road ahead is something you alluded to, Jordan. San Jose, okay, a little bit of a breather, but they can't drop the ball. It's like the Chicago game. You can't screw this up, especially now. San Jose lost a couple players, most prominently Tomas Hertl. They're probably their best skater, probably the best player overall. And then they had this gauntlet of Toronto, Boston, Toronto again, Carolina, Boston again. Oh, wow. And then Florida. And Boston and Florida, the 23rd and 24th, they're both at home, but still, you're talking about 2 of the top 5 or 6 clubs in the entire league. So it's going to be tough. And the Islanders, who are right behind the Flyers at 2 points as we record this, don't have quite as taxing a schedule. And a lot of people are thinking that there's the club. If there's any that's going to catch the Flyers, that they have games in hand and the easier schedule.
Yeah, it was funny. Maybe a couple weeks ago, if someone asked me the most dangerous team to the Flyers, I thought maybe it would have been the Penguins, just because they had so many games in hand. They have so much pedigree on their roster, and they have a great coach behind the bench. But standings will really tell you which team's the most dangerous. And yeah, it's clear cut. I think it's the Islanders. They're playing their best hockey. They have 2 games in hand. They still have a head-to-head game against the Flyers left. And they're kind of nipping on the Flyers' heels here. The Flyers have a gauntlet of a schedule. I mean, the 2 teams that really worry me are Toronto and Boston, 2 teams that I don't think they've played well against in recent history, and they've got 4 games, against those 2 teams. But as Chef alluded to earlier, I mean, they've had a lot of wins over top 10 teams. So I think part of it's like, hey, they've been here, they've done this, maybe they'll rise to the occasion. But I think it's very justified if you're concerned with the schedule. Because they're taking a big time hit in their depth on defense, and the schedule does not lighten up. So I think there's reason for concern, and you also still have a rookie goalie in net. I think very highly of Sam Ersson, but he is still a 24-year-old rookie. So we'll see where it goes. It'll be very interesting. If the Flyers do make the playoffs, I will say I don't think you can't say they didn't earn it. I think they will certainly earn it if they get in.
Yeah, absolutely. Chef?
Well, is there any What are the chances? I mean, I guess we'll probably get Sealer back first. I'm guessing Risto is done for the year based on everything I've heard. Drysdale, now it wasn't surgery. Was it, I'm guessing it's something, maybe a possible dislocated shoulder or something, or collarbone or something along those lines. If they make the playoffs, does he make it back? We all don't know. They're very cryptic about everything. I'm thinking there's got to be a small chance that Drysdale gets back for the playoffs.
Yeah, I think there's a small chance for sure. It sounds like it's something to the shoulder that he had the real serious injury to a year ago, where I think it caused him to miss, I think, all but 10 games, I believe. So it's a shame he re-injured it, but I don't know exactly where they are with him. I think they said originally about a week ago, they said in a couple weeks he was going to get reevaluated. So we'll see, but I don't think he's been ruled out for the season by any means. But I think if he would return, it would be towards the tail end of the regular season. And of course, if they make the playoffs, come back in the playoffs. But by far, I think Sealer's the one that has the best chance to come back as soon as possible. And, he's an important guy for sure.
Oh, definitely.
Has Risto been a very similar injury with a shoulder, or is this some other type of upper body?
Yeah, it's an upper body thing. I've heard some things, but nothing real firm on it, so I can't comment exactly on what it is. Mm-hmm. But I think it was more serious than what they thought, and now I think they're not exactly sure where it's going to go. But I think it's going to take time. So if there's anyone probably with the bleakest injury, I would think it's probably Ristolainen.
Yeah. So I remember watching his skate, like his gait, and his gait was off. Much like, remember when I said before Hayes got, it was said that Hayes was hurt. I said his skate's off. He's something wrong. I think it might be something with his core, his obliques or something, and it's turned into possibly maybe like a hip flexor or a groin or something that really involves more than just your upper body, your middle torso there. I think it's going to be somewhere related on those. And I don't know. I have no insider information. I just look, and it was just observation. Normally he stretches out and he can do that, but he kind of short armed a lot of stuff. And I was like, damn, that's exactly what Kevin Hayes was doing before he was hurt. Because a lot of times when he first got here with the Flyers, you would see Kevin Hayes on a penalty kill, put his stick out there, and because he's so freaking tall and long, and he was breaking up a lot of plays at the blue line, maybe not getting the breakaways because, but he was breaking up plays, and that wasn't happening after that. And I see the same thing happen with Risto. So it wouldn't surprise me if it was like a core injury or obliques or something along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to speculate, but I will say he seemed out of kilter from the very beginning. He came back, but he couldn't train because he had some military duty in Finland that the Flyers weren't up to speed with, and he did that, and he came back, and he wasn't quite the same. Then he came back and played pretty well, and then of course he had the re-injury, and sure could use him now, and he's a whole other topic in terms of what's going to happen in the off season. So,
yeah, big questions there with Ristolainen for sure. I think if he was healthy, it's certainly a guy that we probably would have heard his name floated out there for trade reasons, but wasn't healthy. And I think it's something that now they're just focused on trying to get him healthy again so he can play hockey, and then they can reevaluate where they are in terms of his future here.
Jordan, what do you think, looking at these, 17 games left, what do you think they have to do in terms of, like, if they go 500, is that going to be good enough to make it? Right now they have 74 points. That would put them, I guess that would be 91 or something. I guess it depends on who can get hot, like the Islanders. They do have Sorokin. That is a guy you can ride a little bit. That's the scary part.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, like, one of the best goalies in the league, and it's a team that's got some guys that have been around a little bit. They've been in the playoffs, and now they have a new coach kind of breathing, new life into them. So definitely a concerning team. As for what the Flyers have to do, yeah, I think 500 might get them in, but it might not too. I mean, I wonder if they have to finish in the 94, 95 maybe range points.
Yeah.
It's going to be tight, but it's like I thought the Metropolitan Division was going to be really good, and it's kind of been underwhelming. A lot of like inconsistency outside of the top two teams. Like even the Flyers, I think they've been obviously a major surprise, but they've hit their lows from time to time. They had a 5-game losing streak. They're not playing their best hockey right now, and they're still in third because I think the division below them is just so up and down, and a lot of teams in weird spots with, are they declining? It's a time to, rebuild, that type of thing. So I'm not exactly sure how they're going to have to fare because who knows? The Islanders could take a drop as well. I think the big thing is really for the Flyers, and I believe it when I say it, I think they're just worried about themselves. If they can, they're still in the driver's seat, and if they can kind of control what they can control, I think they'll be okay. I like their chances to make it. I do.
Yeah, it is going to be a challenge. I think of Toronto and Boston, like you were saying, those are two teams that we just really have struggled with, and we struggle with their top talent. It's kind of like we just can't control Pasternak or Marchand or Austin Matthews or Nylander. One of those guys is going to burn the Flyers, and that's even in this season when they've been better and looking like a playoff team most of the way, that has burned them. Even with the list of all those teams that they beat. It's only when they can control that middle, keep those teams from developing speed or get their sticks in passing and shooting lanes and make it frustrating for the teams. Playing the way they Torts wants them to play.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. I think star power at times gets the best of them, and that's probably the biggest argument. I'm sure some of the folks that maybe are pro tank, and I think it's justified, is that eventually star power takes over, right? Stars get the best of you, and eventually you need one of those guys. And if you don't fall to the bottom, if you don't bottom out, you don't really get those players. But I think there's an argument for both sides that you don't always need a superstar, and that superstars don't always win cups. And I think there's an argument that they have a couple really good players, like Travis Konechny, who I think's starting to blossom into an all-star, and a guy that's going to be a name in the league. I mean, a guy that I think could flirt with 40 goals. So, but without a doubt, they have struggled against the big names. And if they can just take a couple of games from those two teams, I think it would be huge for their psyche. It would allow them to kind of stay afloat during that stretch. And then the schedule kind of lightens up a little bit. But it's kind of incredible, right, that we're even talking playoff race. I wasn't anticipating this. And here we are. The Flyers have been in a playoff spot for pretty much since January, which is hard to believe. And I think that's a good sign for their rebuild, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Chef, that was the last one from me. Do you have anything else?
No, I think the last time Jordan was on was over the summer here, right before we going through the season. I would just I'm going to reiterate what I said then. I said they're going to be a fun team. They're going to be in it till very, very last second. And if they don't make it, it's going to be like 2 or 4 points they're going to miss by. They're going to be hanging right in there. And I think it's, even if they don't make it, people got to understand, you got to consider it as still a win because they're playing meaningful hockey. And that's a learning process in itself too. So even if you don't make the playoff, you're still gaining that experience to go, oh, I remember I got to do this now. When we get to these games, I got to maybe get that extra half an hour of sleep or, whatever you eat, whatever the hell you eat, whatever your voodoos are because hockey guys are very superstitious guys. So, because, there's a chance they're going to get clocked on a couple, but they do finish with the Capitals, the Devils, and the Canadians. The Rangers are in there, and the Blue Jackets. So you can get 4 out of 5 at the end of the season there, hopefully. And maybe like if you're 2 points of striking distance or 4 points of striking distance there, you got a good shot to hang in there. So you're paying your dues, but the last 5 games of the season, you could just hang in striking distance. You got a good chance. So,
and I think that will be the most polarizing argument. If they just barely missed the playoffs, I think you're going to have some people saying, well, this is exactly what we didn't want. We didn't want them to be a fringe playoff team because now they don't get a top pick. And then you're going to have people like you, Chef, and I'm with you, is that it's a sign of growth. It's a sign of growth that they were in it like this. And I would be concerned if they were littered with aging players, but they're not. They
They're
have
not.
they have a lot of young pieces that I think are going to be good and getting better. And if they're in it and they're playing meaningful games, I think it's important. And that's how I think the people in-house feel, without a doubt.
And to that point too, remember that, you go back 4 years, they're not in this position either. Right. So it does, but they're in worse shape because right now they got what? How many picks did we talk about, Isaiah, in the next?
They have 8 picks in the first 2 rounds the next 2 years.
Next 2 years. Okay. So even if they don't take all of them, and I think we talked to, Jason was like, you might not be able to sell. You can't sign. Even if you get 4 number ones, you can't sign them all at once anyway. That's ridiculous. You got to space stuff out, and I get it and all that. I said, but here, yeah, they might, even if they miss the playoffs and then they're at that 9th place or 10th place for a pick in the first round. But guess what? Now you got 2 firsts and what? 2 seconds. You can look at teams like San Jose or Montreal, and you can sit there and go, all right, where are they in their rebuild? And go, all right, so how about this? I'll give you my first round and 2 second rounds this year to bump up to 3 or 2. I doubt anybody will ever give up 1, especially with what you got coming in the draft this year. But you could get like to 2 or 3.
I don't think you could get into the top 10. Be honest with you. I mean, that's the main benefit. I mean, the Flyers are going to have like
I don't
an
discount
18 and a 26. It's not going to move you up the value chart unless they throw in another player.
They would probably throw in a prospect, which yeah, or a
so,
player.
I mean. Yeah, there is some merit to the other side of the argument. It's not
absolutely.
that easy. It's
not that easy, but it's not impossible either.
No, it's like Godfather 2. Difficult, but not impossible. But remember, Pasternak.
Godfather 3 was like the last 2 seasons, so we're not going to talk about that.
No, it's actually not a bad movie. It's just relative to expectations, but
yeah.
Just remember, Pasternak was taken like 26th or something like that. So it does happen. And of course, there's Datsuk and guys that are drafted even outside the first, 50 players. So
Pavelski is the biggest one. Joe Pavelski.
Yeah, 7th round. He's still playing. Unbelievable. Yeah. So Jordan, where can people find you, your work, the great stuff you are offering up for the Flyers fans?
No, thank you so much, guys, for having me. It's great to chat with you guys. I always enjoy it. And yeah, you can always find my work at my Twitter handle, or I should say X handle, jhall at NBCS or at jhall NBCS. And my work is at NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com on our Flyers page. So people can catch my stuff there.
A quick question for him before you leave about your show. That one you did with Brooke, was that a remote? Were you at the somewhere? Do you always go? Do you travel out to there? Is that a regular location for you guys? At the casino? Was it live casino?
Yeah, it's at Rivers Casino. It's like in Northern Liberties, and we have a sponsorship with them. So we try to do one there live every week.
Awesome.
And then we do another one in our newsroom as well. So it's Rivers. It's nice. It's a nice casino. It's a lot of like a lot of big TVs, exactly what probably a sports fan wants. And we try to go there and do one live every week, which is always fun.
Oh yeah, very cool.
Put it out there. We'll share it for you. Maybe I'll pop down one of these nights and take the wife out for a casino run. Put her at the roulette table and sit there and listen to you guys talk. That'll be fun.
There you go. We get some money too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did remote with Brooke back in 2019.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so that's great.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So Jordan, thanks so much again.
Excellent.
And look forward to seeing you again very shortly down the road.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
All right, Jordan. Thanks, man.
Take care, guys.
All right. So, Chef, I was going to pop in there. You were on a roll with the schedule talking about that last game with the Capitals and a couple more. But I'm thinking by the 28th of this month, when the Flyers are in Montreal, and the 30th, they have this back-to-back. They're home versus the Blackhawks. 2 easy games, easier games, I should say.
Mm-hmm.
We'll know a lot about their chances.
Yep.
Those will be critical games for them. And then they'll have a final gauntlet of, what do we got? 7. They'll have a final 7 games. And we'll see what they got. Your Philadelphia Flyers for 23-24. So any final thoughts, Chef, before we hit the road?
No, I mean, I look forward to them bouncing back and hopefully destroying San Jose tomorrow. I just not so much because I think they can. I just think they need to. I think this is one of those games in the season where it defines. It's ironic it's San Jose again, isn't it? It started with San Jose. Let's turn it back around with San Jose again. I feel bad for them, Shark soup. Let's call it shark soup game. So and cook them suckers up. So I always liked San Jose. I was a big San Jose fan when they came in the league. It was my West Coast team. You know what I mean? Yeah. So awesome, and it's great. You guys want to argue with us about our positions? I think we're a little out there. You want to tell me I'm crazy, but I think there's going to be some great trade that they're going to make in the offseason to jump at least, into the top 10 picks. So we'll see. But we'll and if you want to argue with me on that, you can catch me on X at Chef to the Left B on X.
Okay. And you can catch the great Dan Silver, who's on assignment tonight at DSilver88 on the app formerly known as Twitter. You can catch the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck at O&B Puck. On X, you can catch us on Getter. We occasionally say some things over there, and we have every show. Don't get me wrong. We have every show there that is posted at O&B Puckcast at O&B Puckcast. And if you could follow and subscribe to the O&B Puckcast on Apple, Spotify, iHeart, TuneIn, Amazon Audible, virtually every major podcast platform. And of course, we have a YouTube page, just plug in there, O&B Puckcast, a Facebook page. It really helps move us up the charts when people are looking for Philadelphia Flyer podcasts. And the more people that subscribe, it tickles that algorithm and it directs people there, and it really helps us out. So till, I don't know, just a couple days, we're recording another show this week. We're going to have Lyle Richardson from Specters Hockey, and we're going to dedicate this show strictly to wrapping up the top 15 trade deadline deals. And we're going to talk about also the 5 teams that did the best on the trade deadline or during the trade deadline period, roughly within that 2-week period or so. So we're going to hit you again this week. And then, of course, we'll have a regular show probably in about 7 to 10 days. But until then, everybody, take care.